Hello, and welcome to Women in Business, where we interview entrepreneurs and senior managers and show you the strengths, successes, obstacles, and roadblocks women experience in business. Since I believe every person in business needs to be visible, I'd like to invite you to watch www.sob6, that's the number 6, tips.com, which will give you some valuable information should you get the call to be on radio or TV, which I think is extremely important. If you'd like to contact me personally, drop me a line at Gayle Carson, that's Gayle, GayleCarson13 at gmail.com, or go to my website, www.spunkyoldbroad.com, and sign up for my weekly newsletter.
Hi, everyone. This is Gayle Carson, and as you probably know, this month I am interviewing people from the Miami Book Fair, the International Miami Book Fair, and it's really been a delight to talk to these people, and I have someone who is equally delightful as my guest now, and that is Norma Watkins. Norma is a professor emeritus at Miami-Dade College, and her book opens with her flight from her husband and children in Mississippi and explores the consequences of exile. Humorous and discerning, the book shows how excruciating it is for women to do what men take for granted, find a harmony in love, work, and parenting. And the name of her book is That Woman from Mississippi. So welcome, Norma.
Oh, thank you, Gayle.
You know, it's interesting that you say it's excruciating for women to do what men take for granted, because I coach a lot of women, and especially women 50 plus, and it's interesting, even with today's younger women, that they are not as assertive as men are. One of the things we talk about is the fact that women always qualify themselves before they look for a job, and men just go for it and they'll say, I'll figure out the rest of it later. And so tell us what you meant by doing what men take for granted, finding the harmony in love, work, and parenting.
When I tried to get this book published, one of the editors said, I simply can't get past the fact that she left her children. And I keep reminding people that men leave their families and their children all the time, and nobody says a word. But it was certainly, in the 60s especially, the reason people came down on me so hard. And I found a great quote by Hilton Als in the New Yorker. And he said, it is much easier to hate your own kind than to dismantle the system that makes you hate your own kind. And, you know, I was listening to the hearings on the radio, the Ford Kavanaugh hearings today, and I think how much has changed, really, for women. I find my grandchildren much braver than I was at that age, but I still think that in every instance, even people who knew nothing about my circumstances, when I applied to be a professor at Miami-Dade, men would say things like, you're too cute to be in a job like this. Things that were incredibly demeaning and which I had no power to come back against. And I think if you're raised in the South, you are raised surrounded by this great loving circle of, or at least I was, parents, siblings, aunts, uncles, cousins, and you grow up feeling surrounded by love. And in my case, I grew up feeling surrounded by love and surrounded by black servants. And for the longest time, I did not realize anything was wrong with that picture. And certainly no one around me informed me of that. But I think when Brown versus Board of Education came down, it was just as if the sky had opened for me, and I saw exactly what was wrong with our society. And I was astonished that, with the exception of 5 or 6 people, nobody around me agreed. And my father, who was Governor Ross Barnett's personal attorney at that time, we fought at the dinner table from the time that decision came down until the time I left home. And when I did leave home, and in a terrible way, I have to say, the only way I could find the courage to leave is by completely breaking with social custom, just tearing a hole in the fabric of my life. And it meant leaving behind 4 children. And my mother told me, "You have destroyed my life," because in that day, her life, the only life she was allowed, was to be a successful wife and mother. And so she had given her life to raising this daughter who would grow up, marry, join the junior league, produce more children like myself. And by leaving, I destroyed that. And so although I went back regularly to see my children, and Southerners are very polite, everybody acted as if they didn't think I was a pariah. I was a pariah. None of my friends came to my reading when I published the first book. And the reason I was told was they had never forgiven me for the way I had treated my husband a half a century before. I got a review of the first book in the Jackson neighborhood paper, which called me a coward, a liar, and a whore. And I was, as you can imagine, astonished. And I looked at the picture of the young man in the paper and found out that he was the son of my ex-husband's 4th wife. So these feelings of negativity follow you not just through your life, but down through generations. So yes, it's hard. It was hard.
So how old were your children when you left?
My children, the oldest was 8 and the youngest was 2.
So they were really little. And
they were little, yeah.
Did they stay with your ex-husband for their entire period of growing up, or did they come to live with you at all?
The older son, I had 2 boys and 2 girls. The older son came to live with us when he was 14. The way we arranged it, my husband got sued and got custody, and the way we arranged it is I could come home to see them in Jackson anytime I wanted. I could write and telephone as much as I wanted. They would come to see me twice a year in Florida, a month in the summer and 2 weeks at Christmas. And so I would travel there twice a year. They would travel to me twice a year. And Clay, the older son, lived with us from 14 until he went away to college.
So tell us about, because the people who have not yet read your book, tell us about what it was like. I mean, how is your relationship with your children today? Let's ask that first.
I think we have a good relationship. My husband, their father, has died, and he died before I published the first book. And I think they're very glad of that. They love their father very much. But I think they also love me. And I think for the girls especially, I showed them another path. My younger daughter tells me what a relief it was when she was about in the 5th grade, when I told her she did not have to get married and have children. That was not the only thing she had to do. And she said that just made her feel so much better. And today she's a veterinary pathologist at the University of Tennessee. So I think we all have regrets. I think they missed me. It changed their lives. I missed huge chunks of their lives, which I can never get back. But in some way it saved my life. And in some way I think it showed them you don't have to follow the custom. You don't have to stay and do exactly what everyone around you tells you you have to do.
So is the reason you left abuse?
Oh, no. Fred did not abuse me. You know, I left because of definitely because of racial abuse. These were the mid-'60s. Emmett Till had been killed. The 3 civil rights workers had been dug out of that landfill. It was a horrible time in Mississippi. And if you described yourself even as a moderate, you were vilified. You were shunned. My husband was an architect and builder. He depended on wealthy clients to make our living. If I did anything out of line, like one night I went to hear Joan Baez sing at our local black college, and by the next morning my parents knew. So you were watched. You were certainly castigated. My father was one of the founders of the White Citizens Council and a charter member of the Sovereignty Commission, which until recently was the biggest spy agency in this country. And part of the reason I left is because I could not bear being stifled anymore. And quite frankly, part of the reason I left is because I fell in love with a civil rights lawyer.
So had that civil rights lawyer not been a part of the life, you might have stayed.
He claims not. He claims that I was on my way out and that he happened to be the ride out of town. But I certainly think meeting somebody with the kind of courage I lacked to speak up, no matter who you were speaking to, gave me, having somebody to leave with and somebody who was precisely my opposite, could never be squelched, had no question that he was in the right, and he didn't care how many Mississippians told him he was wrong. That really helped. And it gave me an opportunity to go to graduate school. My husband had let me, as he said, go to undergraduate school and finish and get my BA at a local college, but when I got fellowships to graduate school, he told me I could not accept them because I was a mother, married, and I had made that choice. And leaving with Bruce, one of the things I was able to do is go on and go to graduate school.
Well, it's interesting because a lot of the beliefs that people have, right or wrong, are because of their environment, because of how they were raised, and because of how things always were. And that's difficult for some people to break away from. It's just like you were saying, the gentleman who said you were too cute, to be a teacher. I mean, he, in his own mind, absolutely would not think of that as something that's derogatory or shouldn't be said, because to him, he's paying you a compliment. He's telling you how pretty you are. And you're hearing it as, what are you talking about? So it's interesting that without the right education and the right acknowledgement of circumstances, that people find it hard to change how they are. And I think it's getting better. We have a long way to go, but it's getting better because people are on notice now that everything they say and they do, first of all, is on record because of our cell phones and our digital cameras and our computers and everything else, our iPads, everything that we walk around with. And so I think that's changing a little bit, but there are still a lot of people who have views that are really shaped by their environment and where they came from. And that is not an easy thing to change. So,
no,
yeah.
I agree.
So
I agree. I teach right now. I teach creative writing, and my message, not just to women, to everybody, is tell your stories. If the one thing you can do to answer any questions you have about how you lived, the mistakes you made, the regrets you have, is to tell your stories and
exactly
tell them truthfully. Tell them truthfully, and it'll help you understand. It'll help you to forgive the people you feel like in your life were villains, and it'll help you to forgive yourself.
So, what do you think, if you hadn't left, what do you think the life for you would have been, as well as your children? How did it affect your children? Did it change them in any way?
Well, none of them live in Mississippi now, and they're all Democrats. And in Mississippi, only 3% of white people are Democrats. So I would say yes, it changed. It definitely changed their lives. It gave them permission to leave. It gave them permission to not follow custom. I think for my family who stayed, if I had stayed the way my sisters did, I feel my mother became an alcoholic because in those days, in the 50s and 60s, my mother was a brilliant woman. She actually could run our entire family hotel, but yet after she married my father, she was allowed to be on committees, volunteer, make good dinners for the judges my father brought home, raise his daughters, and never express her own talents in any meaningful way, nor to make an income from it. Because in the South in those days, if a woman went out and got a job, it was a message that your husband was not able to support you. So if I had stayed, I don't know. I have one fantasy that I was, taking courses at the college when I was doing my undergraduate degree with Eudora Welty. So I have one fantasy that if I had stayed, because my husband made good money, I would have become a writer sooner, been a better writer, and maybe found more success. I have another fantasy that I would have become an alcoholic like my mother, or I might have drunk myself to death like my youngest sister did, or I might have died in a state mental hospital like my middle sister did. So I feel blessed to have left. I feel like I got out, I was able to get my master's, I was able to get my PhD, I was able to have a great career teaching. I was able to, rather late in life, go on and get Master of Fine Arts in Creative Writing and begin to actually write these books where I told my story. I look at life for women in the South, and it's not just the South, and feel like the real poison is that there were all these talented people who were never allowed to use their talents and given, could be on committees, could volunteer, but could have been running banks and corporations and could have added so much to our culture, and it simply wasn't allowed.
Well, even in societies where it's allowed, Norma, I think that there's still that issue of women, A, not living up to their potential, B, not being given the opportunity to live up to their potential. And think about how many people today, women who are serving on corporate boards, not a lot. How many people are running large corporations, not a lot. So it's still there. I mean, because, and a lot of it does have to do with family. It has to do with a woman wanting to be home with her kids. And I know I talked to my granddaughter this morning, and she's got a job where she's working in a college, not teaching, although she does have her degree to teach, but doing registrar work. And she leaves her home at 7:30 in the morning, and then gets home about 7 at night because of the commute. And she says, about 15 minutes with her youngest child, who's 3, and has some more time with her older child, who will be 10, because she takes him to the bus stop at 7:30, and she has some time because he stays up later. But it's still there. It's still a problem for women, and a lot of women don't want to put in the time, the effort, the hours, the estrangement from their family that a job like that requires. On the other hand, you hear some CEOs, women CEOs, who say, look, I am home for dinner as many nights as I can unless I'm out of town traveling for something, but that's the way it is. My job is I get up, I go in, and I finish at 5 o'clock, and I'm home for dinner with the family. So a lot of it is, what is the company like that you're working for? What do they allow? Number 2, how you set up your own schedule. But I guess a question that everybody had, especially back at the time, was when you left, why you didn't take the kids with you.
Yes, well, I had 4 children. I was leaving with, I had no money. I think I had about $180 that I got for being the most talented senior when I graduated from college, and I had a little bit of traveler's checks left from a trip, and I actually had the guts to ask my husband for $500 before I left, but I had no money. I was leaving with a man who was going to work for legal services at a very, working with poor people down in the growing area of Miami, and he had very little money, and I knew if I took 4 children, I couldn't go to school. I mean, I knew it. That, a large part of the reason I left was wanting to go to graduate school because I wanted to become a professor, and I couldn't take them. And my husband told me, which I firmly believed at the time, if you leave me, you will never see these children again.
I can believe he said that, because that would be symptomatic of the time. Absolutely.
Well, and I think if I had run away with my children, there was certainly a judge in Mississippi who would have made me, let him come after me and bring him right back, because he did everything he could from that day to the time he died to show me how much he despised me. To every person he married had to despise me. He punished the children before and after they visited me. I don't mean physically punished them, but punished them by behaving coldly toward them and not letting them ever talk about what happened when they were with me. I look at, I live in California now, so I look at what the tech industry is doing. And a friend of mine is about to have her first grandchild. The mother gets 4 months of maternity leave at her company. The father gets 2 months at his company. And so they're going to take it one at a time. So one of them is home with the newborn for 6 months. I think it's a measure of how much we care about women and children in this country that we don't have some sort of government support for child care. Because until we have that, there's never going to be a fair chance for women to move and act on their talents. You can tell men, you should spend half your time at home, but unless their company supported, and in my opinion, unless the government supports it, it falls back in the man's court. He gets to go to business. I told my husband about this 6 months leave that this couple was getting for their first child, and he was astonished. He said, at my company, you got nothing. People said, where's my cigar? That was your time off. So I do think things are moving in the right direction, just so painfully slowly.
Yeah, it is. Definitely it is. Will you talk about the consequences of exile? What are some of the things that we haven't talked about that happened to you?
I think there's a huge psychological price you pay for doing what I did at the time I did it. I would sit in graduate school and feel as if I were in some sort of out-of-body experience, that part of me was in this classroom taking notes, but there was a part of me still back with my children that surely I had not done this thing. I definitely contemplated suicide. I missed them so badly. I thought seriously about killing myself. I went to counseling. I first went to the university counselor, and who was a very nice man, and he ran a group that sort of like you'd start as an individual, but then you got to move into the group, and I thought the group sounded like fun. And so I said to him after I'd been going a while and I felt so much better, I said, maybe I could join the group. And he said, do you really want to tell a group what you did? And I thought, boy, what I did was so bad, I can't even be in a group. So I would say...
That's a strange thing for a counselor to say.
Well, it certainly got the message across. But I think what I did was live through it. I think what I came out of that experience with is that you're stronger than you think you are. You only have to go through things one at a time. And if you have a goal and if you keep looking at the goal, and my goal was to stay in contact, love my kids, and get a graduate degree, become a professor so I could support myself, while never breaking contact with my kids, and that things would get better. And they did. You know, by the time my kids were like off in college, you know, I think they felt, maybe they felt I should never have been with their father, but they did understand why we weren't together.
Well, this is certainly, you know, a powerful, powerful book. And are you going to be at the book fair, Norma?
I will. They haven't given me a time and day yet, but I will be, I'm sure, on a panel on the weekend of the book fair. I look forward to it.
Well, I mean, I think that I think this is really an incredible story, and you were certainly ahead of your time for what you did. I mean, there's no question in that. And I think it's very brave of you to tell your story and to tell it well. So, again, folks, if you're going to the book fair, look for Norma Watkins. She is a professor emeritus at Miami-Dade College. Her book is That Woman from Mississippi. I think that's a horrendous title, though. That Woman. You're kind of calling yourself out right there, you know, That Woman. So
that's what my ex-mother-in-law called me after I stole the heart of her only son.
I'm sure, That Woman. So I want to thank you for telling your story to us, because it was really revealing. It was very authentic, and it's just amazing where you came from and what you're doing now. And I congratulate you and wish you only the best in the future.
Oh, thank you so much, Gayle. It was a pleasure.
Thanks for listening to Women in Business. I hope you enjoyed today's show. And if you have any suggestions as to who you'd like me to have as a guest, just email me at gaylecarson13@gmail.com. Be sure to check out www.sob6tips.com. And in the meantime, go to www.spunkyoldbroad.com to see the resources I have for you.